Some of you are familiar. Okay. Familiar with the way we usually start our meetings, which is to see the video by Four Arrows on the Indigenous Worldview. Thank you, Rachel.
I'm sorry, I don't have it today. Please forgive me.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Then we will get started with our regular part of the meeting, and it is a pleasure to either introduce you all or to reintroduce you, Lindsay, because I think most of us know you and have met with you before. And thank you so much for coming to speak tonight to us. It was difficult to describe what you'll be talking about and the work of national priorities. I started with, okay, this is what national priorities does, and was thinking maybe you could give us an update because we know the costs of the American war keep escalating. We go right from Venezuela. We know there's a lot of money going into the Sudan. We know that the United States corporate powers are in fact arming Israel and sending supplies to Israel. And now we're taking a look at, I guess, what we used to call the hot war in Iran. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Rachel, could you spotlight Lindsay?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome you. I was going to say how many years you've been working with national priorities. Honestly, I don't remember, but it's many years, and we really are privileged to have you with us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for being here and for the work that you're doing. I know all of us are working harder than usual right now, and I appreciate so much everyone being here and the powerful beginning and the recognition of Paki, who I know was dear to so many people. But I'm based in Western Massachusetts, where which was home to Paki, and so she was one of the first people to welcome me here to the anti-war community when I moved here in 2007, and just very very meaningful over the years to get to engage with her on her home turf here in Western Massachusetts. So thank you for having me. I've been with the National Priorities Project since 2014, and then we became part of the Institute for Policy Studies a couple years later in 2017, and have been there ever since. So what we work on is what we should be spending money on instead of war, and instead of domestic militarism too. Now we've expanded. Always since National Priorities Project was founded in 1983, we had always worked on shifting Pentagon spending to other things. And now we also focus on shifting ICE spending and shifting some police spending and all of these areas where the the government is using force against people. Um, so that is our focus. That's our reason for being. We're hearing a lot of folks now, besides ourselves, talking about how much the Iran war is costing, um, and what that money could do instead. So it's very much something that's on people's minds. I think it's a prime reason why many people in this country are against this war. We know that the war in Iran is not polling well. And one of the things that we're hearing the most often from people is that they don't like what it's costing. So, of course, I'll talk about that. But I also want to talk about what's making that possible, because all of those things, Susan, that you referred to right at the beginning, are all things that are possible because our military budget is so high. Um, and we have $1 trillion military budget. So far, this war in Iran has been funded entirely out of that budget. Congress has not given any additional money for it. The same was true of the invasion of Venezuela. The same was not true of the weapons that the US sent to Israel for the genocide in Gaza. But so many of these military actions, including the bombing of Iran last summer, are happening under the regular military budget because the military budget is that high that it enables all of these things without any explicit permission or any explicit funding. So that's going to be some of what I'll talk about is how this budget is so enormous that it makes these things possible, and um, and that it this is why we are here right now, is because we've made these things possible by granting this huge amount of money to these institutions and to these people who are leading them. But I want to start because I'm going to talk so much about what we should be doing with the money instead. I want to start by kind of reminding us where we are domestically in this country,
Glenn, this goes back on the front porch.
which is
Gotta clean up the kitchen.
sorry, which
Would
is
everybody please mute themselves? Thank you, Rachel. Okay,
Now, is it working now?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
um, so where we are right now for people living in this country, in the United States, is we're in a place where about half of people are struggling to afford basic necessities, food, shelter, healthcare, transportation. Prices are still high. Inflation has slowed down, but it hasn't reversed. So prices are still high. People are still experiencing that. Now we have gas prices going up because of the Iran war, and people are experiencing that. We have an administration in Congress that last year passed a law that will result in, we think, 16 million people losing health care in this country. Some of them have already, at least a million, we think, have already lost healthcare because of that big bill that was passed. Trump's big, beautiful bill or big, ugly bill that was passed last year will ultimately result in about 16 million people losing their healthcare. 22 million people will lose access to some or all of their food stamp benefits during the affordability crisis because of that legislation. We think that some 2 million people already have lost their food stamps, and that number is rising. And that same bill put into place $351 billion in spending for the Pentagon, for mass deportations in the Homeland Security Department, for ICE, for Border Patrol, Coast Guard, and all the agencies that are enacting Trump's mass deportation agenda, and the Pentagon. That $351 billion would be enough to pay for health insurance for the 16 million people who are losing it for the next 4 years. So, and that's how much, that's the period of time for that money, and that's the amount of money. And it happens to be just enough to pay for healthcare for those people for the next 4 years. So that's the choice that Congress and this president made, was to fund the Pentagon and to fund mass deportations instead of funding healthcare for people. And that's the choice that we need to reverse. And we also are in a environment where average incomes for the richest Americans have skyrocketed. The top 1% and the top 0.01% have seen their incomes go up by as much as 800% in the last few decades, while incomes for the bottom 20% of people have basically stayed stagnant during that time. So it's huge inequality, lots of lots of affordability problems, and incomes are not able to keep up. So that's what people here at home are experiencing. They're against the war, but they're also experiencing all of these things, and some of us are experiencing these things also. We're certainly all experiencing higher prices. So this is the environment here at home while they're making these decisions about war and about military intervention in other places. Now, at the same time, we have this big new military spending, Pentagon spending from the big bad bill last year. And that has pushed us over the line to where we, for the first time since World War II, have a military budget that is over $1 trillion. Now, some of you may be familiar with figures that put total national security spending much higher than that. And that's right. If you look at the Pentagon and you look at veterans healthcare and you look at Department of Homeland Security and all of these things, you get up well over $1 trillion. But I'm talking about just the Pentagon itself. That just the military budget is now over $1 trillion for the first time since World War II. And that happened thanks to the big bad bill and thanks to Congress passing that additional funding. That includes, we think this year, at least $120 billion from the big bad bill that they're going to spend this year, possibly more. Very likely more now with the Iran war going on. That includes $34 billion for nuclear weapons, which is also the highest spending on nuclear weapons that we've had in any year since the 1970s, which is how far back the data that we look at goes. It includes another $10 billion in sort of other related military spending, like for retirement accounts and things like that. And all of that puts us up over $1 trillion for the first time since World War II. And that is why they're able to go into Venezuela. And that is why they're able to go into Iran. And that's why that's what's enabling them to do all of these things. So I mentioned there's over $350 billion in the big bad bill for militarism. That includes $170 billion in funding for Trump's mass deportation agenda. 133 billion of it is just for ICE and the Border Protection Agency alone. Those two agencies are $133 billion of that. There's $156 billion in there for the Department of Defense. And there's $25 billion in there for the Coast Guard, which does a little bit of both. It does a little bit of the mass deportations and it does a little bit of the war and military activities. So all of those things together add up to over $350 billion in new spending that didn't have to happen and doesn't have to happen. Much of it has not happened yet. And one of the demands that we can have for folks in Congress is that they pull back the funding that hasn't yet been spent from that. Now, of course, this isn't totally a new story. This, U.S. military spending has been high and rising for a long time. It's been the biggest part of the federal annual discretionary budget in almost every year going back decades. There are some exceptions, like during COVID, when there was a surge of federal aid for COVID assistance that tipped it so that it wasn't the majority, but it's almost always more than half of the federal budget. And this, of course, is what set us up for where we are today. There are 750 military installations around the world. No other country has more than 20 military installations outside of their own borders. That includes a massive presence in Germany, which is one of the major bases, as you may know, for military action by the US in the Middle East. There are some degree of military installations in Middle East countries, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, others, military bases there. Yes, Japan is one of the big three are Germany, Japan, and South Korea. That's where the vast majority of US troops are stationed outside of the US. But all of this, and there's news now that they're moving troops from South Korea and Japan to the Middle East for this Iran operation. So small numbers so far, just a few thousand, but there's very large capacity there, and that's what's making all of this possible. And we've kind of let this happen as a country. We've let this buildup happen for so long that all of these things are just available. So talking about some of the specific things that this has enabled and what the costs of those things are. Obviously, right now we're in this moment where we still have this pretty new military action in Iran, but going back the last couple of years, the US has spent at least $31 billion on support to Israel and broader wars in that region related to that. That's about how much it would cost to. There was a big fight, and you may or may not remember with everything else going on, but back at the end of 2025, there was a big fight in Congress and there was government shutdown. And one of the Democrats' demands to end the government shutdown was to extend these Affordable Care Act or Obamacare subsidies for people to help people afford their health insurance premiums. Republicans didn't agree to that. Those subsidies went away. People aren't getting that help anymore. We've seen health insurance premiums for a lot of those people go up by over 100%. That means that they're more than doubling. we think there are about 1 million people already who have gone off health insurance because of that. But extending those subsidies would have cost about 35 billion, so about the same amount as the US has spent on helping Israel with their genocide in Gaza. So that's one choice that this has enabled. We also kind of going in order of some of what we've seen during the Trump administration. We had National Guard deployments that launched last summer, starting in Los Angeles and then expanding to Washington, D.C., Memphis, New Orleans, Portland, Oregon, Chicago. And these National Guard deployments, some of them were finally found to be illegal by courts, and the Trump administration did actually pull back. But the Congressional Budget Office found that those deployments to those cities in 2025 cost almost $500 million. And they're ongoing. The one in Washington, D.C. in particular is ongoing, but Memphis and New Orleans also still have National Guard troops deployed there. And the cost of that, depending on how long the troops stay and how many of them, could go up to $1 billion this year. And again, this is possible because of the size of the budget, because they have so much money that they can move it around, they can do what they want with it. It's not limited enough by Congress. They can just take it and they can just kind of put it wherever they want and do whatever they want with it. And that is what they are doing. We saw at the very beginning of this year the invasion and kidnapping, the invasion of Venezuela and the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. That looks like it has a price tag of about $3 billion. And we're actually working together with some folks at the Cost of War Project at Brown University on a better assessment of how much that invasion cost. And we're probably going to end up with a number that is higher than $3 billion. But that was the closest number that has been estimated publicly so far. Another thing I want to say about this is a number that's been estimated. We're trying to estimate it together with folks at the Cost of War Project. There is one entity that knows what this cost, but they're not telling us, and that's the Pentagon. And I just want to make clear that this should be public information, and this should be information that people in Congress are demanding from the Pentagon and getting from the Pentagon. And the fact that we have to be estimating the costs of this instead of getting the official correct information from the source is really shows just how unaccountable the Pentagon is, that they don't even have to tell Congress what these things are costing. So that's really outrageous. Now, bringing us to Iran, and I'm going to talk a little bit about about what Iran is costing, what we know about it, what we don't know about it, how we're trying to learn more. And again, this is something where there are lots of news reports with leaks from Pentagon sources or congressional sources that have talked to somebody at the Pentagon and are getting some idea about what this is costing, but there is no official information. The Pentagon is not telling the public, they are not telling Congress how much this is actually costing. And that is outrageous. That's the fact that Congress doesn't get to know what a major new war is costing as it's happening is just outrageous. But the most recent estimates that I've seen that I believe are that the first 12 days of the war costs about $16 billion. And these are estimates. They're cobbled together from a few places, but this one is from um, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS. And if you know CSIS, you know they're not an anti-war organization. They're very close with the military contractors. They're funded by military contractors. They have many ex-military people, which, some of them are anti-war, but not at CSIS. They're not especially. And so this is not a peace or an anti-war organization, but I will say that I find their numbers extremely valid and trustworthy. So I believe this estimate is the best we have right now. It's possible that the war costs so far are much higher than that. But because we don't have the information from the Pentagon on, which munitions they're using, what bombs they're dropping, how many, and just exactly what's going on over there, this is the best information we have. So $16 billion for the first 12 days of the war. That's from CSIS. And then, to the best of what we can tell right now, the rest of the cost is about $1 billion a day. It's possible it's higher. You may have seen reports saying $2 billion a day. And we do have some trustworthy evidence that, especially for that first week of the war, it was more like $2 billion a day. But it's unclear whether the costs are that high now. And so what we're saying is that we think it's at least $1 billion a day at this point of the war. There was some more intensity during the first days. There was some more possible expenses for logistics and moving things into the area and things. Um, but where that puts us um, is, we are now about 20 days in. And so if the first 12 days were 16 billion and it's $1 billion a day after that, then that probably puts us well over $20 billion already for this war that is only just a few weeks old. Um, Now, I want to give a little bit of context for this too, because we have no idea how long this thing is going to last. We don't know what the intensity will be. We don't know whether there will be ground troops at some point. We don't know whether, in the early days, Trump said that this might last 4 or 5 weeks. That is looking unlikely. And certainly the United States is not the only one who gets a say in that. Iran has a say, Israel has a say. And so 4 or 5 weeks is not terribly likely. But even if it only goes 4 or 5 weeks, we're probably looking at least $50 billion. But I also want to kind of take us back. Let's go back 20 years, 20 plus years to the start of the Iraq War. And in the early days of the Iraq War, with, journalists asking folks in the White House, what is this going to cost? How long is this going to last? What are we doing? The answers from the White House were that this would probably be done inside of 5 or 6 weeks, and that it would probably cost about 50 or 60 billion dollars. That was what White House and Pentagon sources told the media in the early days of the Iraq War. Now, we all know that wasn't even close to the truth. That war went on for many years. And in the end, the Cost of War project at Brown estimated that just the Iraq portion of the post 9/11 wars cost almost $3 trillion. So that's a very realistic scenario for what we could be looking at if this Iran war continues on for a longer term. And of course, the $16 billion that's just your $20 billion or wherever we are now. That's just the cost of the actual bombs and flying the planes and having the aircraft carriers there. It's not the cost of caring for veterans after the fact, which that cost actually, as you get further on from a war, or from the start of a war, that cost actually grows much higher. Doesn't include the cost of any money, paying interest on any money we're borrowing as a country to pay for this. It doesn't include the costs of moving the assets, moving all those planes and ships into the region and back out of the region again. In the very early days of the Iran war, we estimated that there were over 200 military aircraft that had been moved into the region for this purpose, in addition to the ones that were already there. And so that was a cost of millions of dollars just to bring them in and keep them there. And aircraft carriers there, those have daily operating costs of at least $10 million and probably more during a time of conflict. So all of these costs are just adding up, adding up, adding up. And started adding up before the war even started, which is something that most estimates haven't included. So these costs are only going to go higher, and we just don't know how much and for how long. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what's next. What are we looking at, and what do we know that we're looking at in terms of military spending? But I just want to kind of do like a whirlwind tour through some of the other scandals that have happened, or some of the other threats that we could see. Um, there's been Trump's 51st state talk about Canada. That has come up more than once. There's been Trump's saying that we're going to take Greenland. That happened. We had a round of that last year. We had a round earlier this year. That may not be gone. That may still come back around again. We have Iron Dome, which is Trump's pet project that is not militarily feasible and but could easily be a sink for tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. We have the report that I don't know if folks saw this report that last year Pete Hegseth spent millions of dollars on lobster and steak and crab legs, king crab for the military, and that it was the biggest September spending spree by the Department of Defense on record. Now, if you don't know, the September spending spree is a little bit of an annual tradition for the Department of Defense because they have so much money. September is the end of the fiscal year for the federal government, and it's use it or lose it. So if they don't spend all the money that they have lying around, they might have to give it back. So they spend in September, and spending can be many times higher than in other months. So was part of the spending spree was they spent millions of dollars on lobster and king crab and steak. And that was a big report that just came out in the last week or two. So that's how much money they have, is that they literally don't know what to do with it. Not to mention, I know somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, they can't pass an audit. They have more money than they can spend, and they don't know where it's going. Um, so that's a recent scandal. And then, of course, there's Trump saying that the US is going to take over Gaza and turn it into some kind of vacation resort land for wealthy people. So these are just some of the non-Iran scandals that have come around, and we can probably see versions of them that will come around again in the near future. Um, so where we're headed next with this, we already have this $1 trillion budget that's already enabled the invasion of Venezuela, the invasion of Iran, the deployment of troops to US cities, and all of these other things. There have been over 8,000 troops at the southern border, as part of the immigration enforcement, and we didn't even talk about that. Spending It looks like the Department of Defense spent about $2 billion last year on immigration enforcement. So all of these things are already fitting into this $1 trillion budget. But, and you probably have heard this, now Trump and Pentagon officials and some Republicans in Congress are talking about a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget. They want to increase it by $500 billion, by half. That $500 billion is close to the annual budget for Medicaid, which provides health insurance for 70 million Americans. And, there's only that's more than 1 in 5 Americans that get their health insurance through that program. So this is a huge amount of money that they're talking about. I might actually, I don't know if I can share a slide, but I have a picture of this. It's let me see if I can just quickly put this up. Can you see that? So this is military.
Yeah.
This is military spending in the US since 1940, and for some reason one of the labels got messed up. But that first high spike is World War II. And as you can see, that's over $1 trillion. That's the last time the budget was over $1 trillion. That next little spike is the Korean War. The spike after that is Vietnam. And then there's a Cold War spike and a 9/11 war spike. And then that orange part is where they're proposing we go next. Look how much higher that is than World War II. We're talking about a budget that is hundreds of billions of dollars bigger than the budget for World War II. And this is adjusted for inflation. So this isn't where there's none of that going on. That's not what the difference is. There is no earthly reason for this. Um, there's just no explanation for what could possibly justify this level of military spending. Um, Now what they say they want to do with it, what they say they want to do with it is put it toward mostly procurement, buying weapons and weapon systems, and research and development for new weapon systems. So in probably about another couple of weeks, we might start to see some of their actual priorities for this. The Trump administration is supposed to release their budget request possibly during the week of March 30th, and that might have some more information on what they want this money for. But what we're hearing, what's been reported from Pentagon officials so far is more planes, more ships, more munitions, more bombs, and more development of the kinds of weapons that they want for the future. And that includes drones. And we're not talking Predator or Reaper drones, the big ones that fly and drop bombs. We'll still have those, but they have the new ones they want, the little drones, that are actually intended to themselves be destroyed as part of the process. Now they have some of these that they've used for the first time in Iran that cost about $35,000 a piece, compared to, say, uh, some of the more intelligent, smart weapons systems that, if they're guided and they have their own navigation and everything, can cost upwards of $1 million a piece. But these little ones cost much less, and they want to develop them in huge numbers so that they can send them out in war and not be able to be and be able to outnumber, the weapons from another combatant. So that's what they want it for. And then there's also the use of AI, which we're also seeing for the first time in war by the United States, is the use of AI. And there's this big news about the Pentagon and Secretary Lynn Pete Hegseth fighting with the AI company Anthropic the other week, over whether they would agree to a contract with Anthropic under Anthropic's preferred rules, which was no using AI without a human involved in the loop to decide to kill people, uh, and no using AI for mass surveillance of Americans. Seem like reasonable rules to me. But the Pentagon didn't want to agree to them. They had this whole argument about it, but they're likely going to want to spend a lot more money on developing AI. And it's possible, we don't know, but the girls' school that the US bombed in Iran that resulted in over 150 deaths, that school was on a target list. It's that we know that it was on a US target list. We know that it ended up there. What we don't know is whether it ended up there because AI put it there. And that is a real possibility because the Pentagon is using artificial intelligence in this war. And they're using it for exactly this kind of thing, for targeting, for information. So it's possible that that is what happened, and that's how that bombing happened. So those are some of the things that we know they're going to ask for as part of this huge $500 billion. It's virtually impossible to imagine how they'll spend that much. Um, if you don't know, every year each of the services is required by law to submit something called an unfunded priorities list. This is like a wish list of, here's what's not in the budget that we wish we could have. We want planes, or we want shipbuilding, or we want shipyards, or we want whatever it is. And those wish lists are typically maybe about $20 billion. So if their wish list is $20 billion and we're about to give them $500 billion, I really don't know where it's all going to go. And there were actually reports a few weeks ago that there were folks in the high levels in the Pentagon saying that they didn't know how to spend all this money. But we'll see. We're probably going to hear their version of it, and we'll see what they say they want it for. Um, and just on that note, because we are about probably to get Trump's budget request for the next year, in his last budget request for this year, he put almost 70% of his budget for the Pentagon and Department of Homeland Security, and only 30% for everything else that's part of the annual budget. That's public education, that's many veterans programs, that's all of our public health spending and medical research and scientific research and all of those things. housing programs, all of that has to squeeze into that other part. So we'll probably, I think, see something similar this year, maybe even worse. So finally, I want to just point out a couple of resources that we have. One is our tax receipt that we put out every year, and we're working on our tax receipt now. We always put it out just around tax time, tax day. So that'll come out in early April. We're working on it now. The Trump administration, interestingly, has not put out the data sources that we usually use to do this. So we're kind of having to dig up figures that are usually made available by the federal government and dig them up in unusual places. But we will be putting out our tax receipt that we do every year. Last year, our tax receipt showed that the average taxpayer paid $3,700 for weapons and war versus less than half of that for Medicaid. So we'll do our new version of that in the next couple of weeks in early April. And then we also have at our website our budget trade-offs calculator, where you can see, for example, for the $1 billion a day that we're spending in Iran, how much of that, what could that buy and other things? How many people could get Medicaid? How many people could get food stamps? How many nurses could we hire? How many teachers could we hire? How many houses could have solar power? All of these other priorities. And so that's very useful. And also has options where you can get specific numbers for your state or your city or your legislative district. And then you can take those and tell your member of Congress. You can put it in a local letter to the editor. Lots of ways to use that information. So those are two things that are good to have, and I'll drop a link for those in the chat. So thank you for listening. That's all I've got.
Please wait. I know that there will be questions, Lindsay. Thank you. And could you all just raise your hand so we can see while we ask questions. I just want to make a comment in terms of the monies that people are no longer spending for healthcare and for medical care, that when those individuals get sick, and most likely they will go to the public hospitals to be taken care of, that's that much more money that will be taken away from the public hospitals. And if in fact what they want to do is to destroy the public hospital system, they're going to be going in a good direction to do that. And those voluntary hospitals that currently take Medicaid funding will no longer take it if the individual cannot be covered by insurance. So we're going to end up with a whole lot of people who will not get health care, certainly in time to prevent further illness. And that will cost more in the long run.
That's absolutely, yes, that's a very good case. Another part of what happened in the big bad bill was that they changed the way Medicaid payments can go to hospitals in a way that is probably going to lead to the closure of rural hospitals, which is already in rural areas already a huge issue that hospitals are closing down, and this will just accelerate that. So making it harder on all kinds of ways for people to get health care.
Thank you. Okay, folks, no more questions?
There's a couple of hands up, it looks like.
I think you can see them.
Donald Smith is one.
Sure, go ahead, Donald, and then Janet.
Yeah, I think I asked you this question on another meeting.
Oh, you just went on mute again.
Okay, I'm not a troll, but I'm asking a difficult question.
Okay.
People who are pro-war will say, if you look at the percent of GDP that is devoted to Pentagon spending, then it's not a near record low. And so to push back against that, maybe you could say something like, well, the denominator in that proportion is inflated by the huge financialization of the economy, the debt, and the Medicare spending. But I want you to, I think some very smart economist should analyze that and develop a good argument to push back against that argument. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So absolutely, I think all of the things you just said are absolutely a part of the explanation for that. Financialization meaning that there's a lot of money trading hands. The way GDP works is that if money trades hands, it doesn't necessarily need to mean that anything is being created or anything is happening. But the financialization is just money trading hands as people sort of inflate. It's like stock buybacks, if you know what those are. That's, we buy it and we just drive the price higher, but it doesn't mean that it's actually worth more. So there's a lot of that going on, like you said, in the denominator for GDP. But I actually think the more compelling reason is that GDP was never a good measurement for how big our military budget should be. I mean, if you think about what that means, it means that if we produce more, if we build more cars, or if we farm more and produce more food, that we need a bigger military. But that's absolutely not true. The size of the military should be dictated by what we need to actually defend the country and its people. And I don't mean its interests in the broad sense that the military does now, where it's everywhere and everything all the time and anything counts. But those things are not things that change when GDP changes. So I think that's the thing to get away from. Because if we had a better GDP measure, we still wouldn't want to measure military spending by GDP.
Thank you, Janet.
Thanks for these resources, Lindsay. I'm going to be sharing them with my local group. Excuse my voice. But I am a little concerned that in the trade-offs, there's only one mention of solar energy, and what we need to be spending billions of dollars on right now urgently is dealing with the climate crisis in many ways. I live in an area where it's 100 degrees today, and it's going to go up to at least 107 tomorrow. The climate crisis is crashing down on the entire world in terrible ways. And in fact, southern Iran is, I think, one of the hottest areas of the planet. So I would love to see something about that in on your trade-offs webpage. And the other thing I want to say is that I think for the first time, we in the peace movement and our allies really need to demand reparations, both for the Palestinians and the Iranians. That would increase the cost of the war, but I think it's, for justice and decency, that needs to be a central demand. And the Iranians are demanding it already, and good for them. So anyway, thanks for your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for your comments. I'm going to drop in the chat another link to some of our recent work on climate. So, and if you have specific examples of what you would like to see on our trade-offs calculator, besides solar power, I would love to hear it, because we are definitely, like, we're always taking suggestions and looking for new things that we can add.
Thank you. Mark Stern, is your hand raised?
Yes. I'd like to say something for contrast. It's not a question. But China, which certainly has a huge military, but it's all focused on defense. It doesn't invade any other countries. It doesn't go in and try to get regime change, etc. My son went to China for 2 weeks to visit with his would-be to-be in-laws, and he got sick, and he had to go into the hospital, and he wasn't covered by their insurance, so he had to pay the freight. So his stay in the hospital cost $50. So, when you have a different kind of economy, it makes a difference across the board. And I think, it's important to contrast that, because we're, talking about China as being such a great threat, but China's not spending on the military like we are.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so yeah, it's our military spending is more than 3 times China's military spending. And it's absolutely, when I said no other country has more than 20 military installations outside of their borders, that's China. And we're the ones that have 750. So Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the 20 includes China, Russia together. Um, if I
That
my
may
guess,
be.
yeah, and you would think you would spend more if you have 160 military bases surrounding your country, um, but you're spending less.
Thank you, Mark. Todd.
Yeah, great talk. Not criticizing it whatsoever, but I'd like to suggest, and my own background is as a lawyer, Guantanamo defense attorney, international law attorney, but also political theorist. When I got done with Guantanamo, I needed to know, I knew I needed better understand fascism because Guantanamo is a genuine fascist legal system. It's military commissions, which is what Germany, Italy, any fascist regime uses as its legal system. And so I went and studied at the New School, Hannah Arendt in political theory for 2 years and getting a master's and help develop this to understand better. And one thing I think we need to understand is we cannot disaggregate any of these things, whether climate change, funding, money, etc. We need to put it all in one larger perspective of we've got a genuine, as much you can criticize pre 2016 in our wars, beginning in 2016, we had a genuine fascist movement come in. It didn't go to the full excess that we're seeing now, but it came damn near. And immediately we escalated war. Even the New York Times reported this by Trump and Netanyahu against Iran. So the Iran war did not begin just a couple of weeks ago. It began, I mean, as far as the escalation and the abandonment of the JCPOA in 2017.
Yeah.
And my point being is, I've sort of disaggregated myself from so many in the peace movement because I saw so many people championing people who are genuine Nazi admirers, like Tucker Carlson and people like Joe Kent, who's now being celebrated by my former Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity colleagues, an organization which I left because it had become so pro-Trump back in January, a year ago. They'll be celebrating, and Joe Kent, what moral courage he has. Well, Joe Kent, was a guy who designed the ICE program basically and declared that we have 18,000 terrorists in this country, Venezuelan terrorists. Tulsi Gabbard is the one who disciplined whistleblowers who said, yeah, this gang is not part of Venezuelan terrorism. So my point is, and I've been arguing this and I've given up really, but the peace movement needs to take a more expansive view of war. And what we have today, and what Tucker Carlson, he's promoting ICE. He's supportive of it. But yet I know a former FBI agent who said, oh, what a great guy. He's for peace. We got to stop falling for somebody dropping the word peace, which is a form of cognitive warfare, and look deeper into what they're really doing. J.D. Vance was celebrated on World Beyond War last July for his speech and I'm going to stop in a second, at Annapolis by a guy actually who's on this part of this meeting. And it's like, what the F are you talking about? He's part of the National Conservative Network, which is allied and intertwined with the Israeli settler movement, through Yoram Hazony. So my point is, if we're going to really be realistic about trying to stop wars, we got to get our thinking more deep and begin looking at what Arendt, how she looked at the world, and stop disaggregating these things and realize that there's something going on right now, internal war, a conservative revolution, as they call it, Heritage Foundation, which Joe Kent, Tucker Carlson, all these people celebrated so often by the anti-war movement, these rightists, they said they're for peace, are part of the Heritage Foundation. I'll stop here, but it's sort of my lament that we're failing because we're not thinking, as our Hannah Arendt would have said.
Todd, I think, right, you raise a really important point. And I know you raise those issues in your emails too. And that's what we're talking about, is having a more educated society. And the question is, how do we do that? And Lindsay, I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No,
but
that's fine.
No, it's done. Thanks.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
really
thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. And that is why when I talk about military spending, I do talk about ICE and Homeland Security spending too, because it is all part of the same authoritarian playbook, and we absolutely need to connect them.
One final point: the national security strategy came out, and my former Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity colleagues fell into step. Oh yeah, what a great thing! It's talking about the Western Hemisphere and staying out of the rest of the world, which is pure bullshit. If you put a closer reading to it, textual reading to it, you realize, yeah, it's ultimately about we got to cut these other costs so we can go to war against China. And the people celebrated by people like Judge Napolitano and the VIPS people and some others, they're ignoring the fact that these people that they celebrate don't make a secret that the ultimate goal is war against China, because how else can we have global domination? So we've got something, we're dealing with something that the Germans had to deal with in 1933. And the Italians had to deal with in what, 1921. Same thing. All these buildings going up in DC, all these things are evidence, and they should be concluded in military spending because they're all part of building the fascist regime that we've now moved into.
Thank you, Todd.
Appreciate that.
Rick, I believe, I'm sorry, I don't know where you are on the screen, but there was a question about how you raise your hand. So do you want to ask Lindsay the question? And you'll have to take yourself off mute. Rick? Oh, you had it answered. Okay. Thank you. Diane.
Okay. No, I agree that we're confronted with a really fascist operation in our country. I work with the International Peace Coalition, and I think that something that is missing really dramatically, and it's been referenced by some of the speakers, that most people in the United States don't understand economics. They think of it as money. And in fact, the whole money becomes valuable if it's actually used for a human purpose. And that, I think Franklin Roosevelt understood that very well. Because the idea of creating these massive public works operations that actually train people as engineers who maybe never went to college. But I met some of these people before their generation faded away. But we could do that again. And that's really, I think, what's missing from the discussion is how do we replace this money economy with one that directs credit into actual productive activity? And that's what I don't know if people know what NWAPA is, the North American Water and Power Alliance. This would bring water that's going out into the ocean from Alaska and Canada, and which if you took a tiny percentage of it and brought it down through the Rocky Mountain Trench, you could bring it all the way down to Mexico. The whole West Coast would be covered, and then you'd build canals across into the center of our country where the water underneath the ground is being used up. That we could train a lot of young people, as engineers, people who are stuck in communities that are going drugs and violence and all these things that our youth are surrounded by. You can bring them out into the countryside to actually build that project. Or
I'm sorry, Diane, do you have a question for Lindsay?
Someone
You have
else.
lots of good suggestions. Thank you. But do you
Well,
have
I
a
wonder,
question?
okay, what do you think about those ideas? And see, I saw you nodding your head, and I think we really need to reach out and I could suggest the EIR.news, which is a source that people can use for these kinds of projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Lindsay, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it's so interesting and actually pulled in a lot of threads from other people's questions too. I mean, I think it speaks to the question of GDP, and GDP being used as a benchmark for military spending is wrong. GDP being used as a benchmark for how well people in this country are doing is also wrong. It doesn't, just because more GDP means somebody's getting richer, it doesn't mean everyone's doing better. So I think we do need to just wholly change focus. We do advocate for all kinds of, job creation and education and, and social programs. But job creation, I think, gets overlooked too much. And I think that's a lot of kind of what you were talking about, is that our government can play a role in actually creating jobs and training people to do them. And it hasn't.
Productive jobs, yeah.
That, yes, right. Yeah, yeah.
Not make
So,
work. Right.
yeah.
Thank you. Donald Smith, did you have a question?
And I will. Let me see. No, my hand is lowered. I don't have a question.
Okay, sorry, I don't see the whole screen, so I'm just looking at the sequence. Did anybody else have another question for Lindsay?
Well, I have a huge thank you for her. Great,
Yes, a very huge thank you.
very, very educational. I've been in your programs before, but every time I go in them, I learn a lot more. So thank you.
Lindsay, thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight at
Thanks for
Veterans
having
for
me.
Peace.
Appreciate you all. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Oh, and thank you for helping to educate us, because I mean, I think we learned a lot tonight. We got information from you that we'll be able to move ahead and use in our meetings and organizing. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Can I ask one last question? Sorry.
It's sure, Rachel. Of course you can.
Thank you. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for all the educational information. It's been amazing whole hour. My last question is that, for example, in case of Department of Energy, I heard that more than a half of its budget to be spent is actually spent for the maintaining plutonium, which is to be material for nuclear weapons. In this manner, is there, or are you aware of other military budgets hidden under the carpet of other departments?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is it is actually more than half of the Department of Energy budget is for nuclear weapons maintenance, and not just plutonium, but the maintenance of the country's nuclear weapons supply. So absolutely, it's Department of Energy is the wrong name. It's more the Department of Nuclear Weapons, and we need a Department of Energy. As you know, we were talking about earlier, climate. We have major climate problems, so it's a problem that we don't have an agency focused on that. I think there's no other federal agency that is quite as embroiled in the military as the Department of Energy, but certainly the FBI part of its function is actually considered national defense, and they operate in ways, in collaboration with the Department of Defense, but have sort of part of their budget allocation there. So that's one example. A lot of federal law enforcement agencies actually have operations in other countries that could maybe better be considered, more of a form of military than of domestic law enforcement. Certainly the Drug Enforcement Agency and others have operations in other countries. So there are lots of other examples, but the Department of Energy is definitely the biggest one.
Thank you very much.
I have one more question.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Lindsay. Go ahead.
I have one more question. How do you get funded?
Mostly through foundation funding. We have a sort of a small number of foundations that we kind of circle through, and some are consistent and give us funding for long term, and some of them dip in and out. But we also from individual donations, which is the foundations are the majority of our budget, but we do definitely also depend on individual donations. And we don't take any corporate money, and we don't take any government money.
So donations are definitely welcome.
Donations are always welcome.
Money well spent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll put you on my list.
Okay. Okay, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining
It looks
us.
like
Rick is raising hand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Are there more people raising their hands? You may not get out of here tonight.
Rick Wayne, well,
Rick,
Yes.
you have a question.
Yes, Lindsay, I was just wondering, do you think this is possible, that this ridiculous use of force could actually lower the United States so much in the opinion of the world that it could have the effect of weakening us so much we won't be able to continue with this kind of atrocities in the future? I mean, I know that's speculative.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely the first part is easy. It is definitely lowering our standing with the rest of the world. There's no question about that. And that's been kind of a slow burn, right? From Gaza to Venezuela to even just the talk about Greenland. Um, and you've had some real US allies like Canada and France have leaders come out and say, like, no, this is not the US isn't in the right place, and the US we can't depend on the US anymore, essentially. So absolutely, and this is doing that. I think that many leaders and certainly the populations of other countries feel like this is making the world more dangerous, and which they're correct about. So it's absolutely lowering the US standing in the world. I don't know that it affects our ability to do anything in the short term or in the medium term, maybe very long term. But again, because of the budget that we have, and we're making our own weapons, and we don't really, Trump has said this, and unfortunately he's right. We don't really need anybody's help to do these things. Um, and I don't think we're anywhere close to, the rest of the world deciding to cut us off economically or something that might actually affect our ability to do this. So I think we're definitely losing standing, but in the short term, I don't think it changes anything about our ability to do this if we have leaders who continue to want to do this.
Thank you. Barry, did you have a question?
Just a comment, if I may indulge myself, but people are so concerned about not sending troops into Iraq.
You're on mute, Barry.
You just went back on mute, Barry.
Yeah, I just want to make a statement that people are concerned about sending U.S. troops into Iran, but they don't give a damn about the bombs.
Yeah,
It's so outrageous.
Yeah, it's very discouraging. I know I've been part of conversations talking about how we can sort of the difference between people's awareness of the Iran war and people's awareness of Gaza in the United States, and how with Gaza there was much more, especially on social media, which if you're not on social media, you might not have seen, but there was much more sort of, you saw pictures of homes that were destroyed, you saw pictures of dead children, you saw all these terrible things. And that kind of information isn't really coming out of Iran in the same way, even with the bombing of the girls' school. So I've been part of conversations with people talking about just the need for people to understand what's actually happening on the ground in Iran, and that people aren't aware enough of how bad it is.
Yeah, but they don't care also. I mean, you look at the news, and if there's 2 Americans that are killed in some incident, it's like 5 days of news. But 150 school children getting killed in another country is, well, that's a bad example because that is getting coverage. But, for the most part, people getting killed in other countries doesn't be a blip on the radar. Is your website in the chat so people can
Yeah,
donate to you?
I included a couple of specific links, but I'll just here the link to the basic website. There it is. I just
Got it.
put it
Thank
in.
you. Checks
Thank you.
in the mail.
And
Thank you
just
very much.
a reminder to everybody, we are Veterans for Peace, and really important to get out there and to be seen and to write letters to the editor and to say we are concerned and we've seen war and we've seen its destruction and we have a responsibility to educate the public. I think more and more in terms of what Todd says, it didn't start with this administration. We really need to learn and know our history and know how we came to be here, not just all of a sudden we have a monster in the White House and we can't do anything about it. We can do something about it. We can keep walking and marching and raise our voices. and Lindsay, and we can learn from Lindsay what information we can use, how we can use it, and how we can get through whether we believe in the current political structure or not. But we do have a responsibility to be heard. And with that, I'm just going to remind everybody that Veterans for Peace does have billboards up all over the country. They're near military bases. They're in inner cities. They are a message both to the American public as well as to those on active duty. You do not have to obey an illegal, immoral, unlegal, unlawful order. It's up to all of us to stand up and to say no, not just those in the military, and that we are, in fact, going to continue to march for peace and to have our voices heard. And just in case you haven't heard, there is an attempt by this administration to try to make sure that all young males are registered, not just through their schools, but to pull together all the information that is known throughout the various agencies. And I think it's important for us to think about that because at the time when the draft was in this country, mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers got out into the streets. How do we get them there again? How do we get people involved in the terrible monstrosity that we have become throughout the world? And to people on this country, in this country, how do we in fact protect each other and maintain our community and our humanity? And Lindsay, thank you for giving us the
Let me
tools
just
to
praise
keep us
veterans. When the Cuba cut off of fuel to Cuba occurred, there was a very small demonstration in Boston. Very few people turned out, but Veterans for Peace was there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just add a quick word, just to clarify?
Absolutely.
So one of my complaints against people, fellow peace, well, I don't call myself a peace activist anymore because I'm not going to ally myself with a right wing. But when they draw this moral equivalence between, well, this is what we've always done, it's horrible what we've always done, and now we're still doing it. No, this is an entirely different degree of what we've done in the past, entirely different genus, you could say, because now we're into something that we've seen before in Germany in 1933-45. One other point, we got to get over, I would argue, too many people think boots on the ground, that's war, non-boots on the ground, not war. No, there's multiple domains of war that the United States is always waging against other countries, including Greenland now. You know what's going on with Greenland. We're in the process of destabilizing it, toppling it, etc., taking it over. Same with these other countries. When our president says we have targets, it means take him seriously. He's using all the other instruments of war, except maybe the absence of boots on the ground. So let's not fall for this shit that people keep telling us to sort of alleviate our concerns.
And to alleviate our conscience, I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, folks. Again, thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us this evening, and thank you everybody who joined us.
And thank you, Veterans for Peace.
Yes. Yes, a reminder of more work that we have to do, a lot more. So everybody is welcome to stay for the next part of the New York City chapter meeting. But before you leave, I do just want to make a quick announcement. I mean, I think, and I'm reminded all the time about how we do forget the past. So you all will remember that the United States used Agent Orange dioxin in Southeast Asia as a way to destroy the food supply and has created pain and issues with succeeding generations. I just found out yesterday that part of a science group that we had developed through Veterans for Peace has in fact been able to prove a low birth weight among Vietnamese babies that were born whose mothers were impacted by Agent Orange dioxin. It is kind of a first, it's a huge study, and it is something that I think is a reminder to all of us that whatever happens in war continues to have an impact on succeeding generations, and that what is happening today will have an impact on our children, on our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So we need to get out there and stop it. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Okay, so we will go on to the New York City meeting and go through new business. I guess, it's new business and it's ongoing business. Do you want to talk, Jim, about your suggestions? And again, thank you and thank Todd Pierce for this wonderful dialogue and discussion you've had about bringing legal suit against the government for actions around Venezuela, etc.
So I'm happy to speak to that, Susan, if I may.
Sure.
Susan had recommended about a month ago when we were looking for experienced legal advice on advancing this suit. That I speak with David Gaspas, who's an attorney, former head of the National Lawyers Guild. And I reached out to him and we had a brief conversation on the telephone. And one of the issues he raised was the question of standing and how under Article 3 standing is determined. And he advised that we look into that a bit further. I had written a draft brief and I did some more research into standing and added that to the brief and have sent that off to him. And Todd, I copied you with that as well, and Susan. Unfortunately, I've only done that today because the day after speaking with David Gaspas, I suffered a stroke and I was in the hospital for almost a week. Thankfully, the prognosis is good and I'm almost totally recovered, but it was a bit of a trial for a while. So we'll wait and see what David says. And I also wanted to add that in my notes to him, I had also suggested that the nature of the complaint that we hope to file, considering the question of standing, the plaintiffs could be individuals or organizations or members of active duty service or even congresspersons if we could find one with enough backbone. So we hope to resolve that question fairly quickly, and then we can move forward. This will be, if we are successful, this will be a suit that is filed in a civil court or perhaps a criminal court. But not through the UCMJ because trying to file through the UCMJ has raised issues that have so far been fairly intractable in terms of who might. I mean, we're going to come back to it, and Todd, you can jump in if you like about this, but we're concentrating our efforts for the moment on pursuing the civil pathway. I just wanted to comment. I didn't want to hold Lindsay up any further, but on the question of education that Susan has mentioned and Todd mentioned and a few others. I worked in 1972 in Washington in a small anti-war legal office that was funded by Joan Baez and Jane Fonda. And at the time we subscribed to all of the military publications. And there was a movement, as well as the anti-war movement, there was an associated movement to end the draft, waged by some of the same organizations and the same people. There was an article in the Army Digest at the time, written by some officer, whose name I can't remember, which complained that the education level of draftees was too high. And the draftees' knowledge of politics and what really makes the world go round the world and the war go around, was too sophisticated. And it resulted in things like fragging and resistance within the military. It helped the radicalization of veterans after they were discharged. The draft was very unpopular among the general public, and that was becoming a problem. What he was advocating was getting rid of the draft purely for the reasons that it was bringing in people who were too educated into the military. He further advocated diverting funds nationally from education and into the military. And his particular focus was on diverting funds from education and into military recruitment into deprived areas in urban centers in the States. So we've inherited that thinking. Obviously, has been much expanded. So this is not a new thing. I will be in touch as we pursue this lawsuit, and I'll be reaching out to some of the other organizations who will be endorsing this. Among them, Common Defense. I've had some discussions with them. They claim on their website to have something like 200,000 members across the country, and in other organizations as well. So thank you, Todd, and thank you, Susan. So we'll be back in touch about this.
Thank you, Jim. There any questions? Thank you. I didn't see Tom Gogan and Move the Money. Okay, Vietnam Agent Orange Relief Responsibility Campaign. We do have two bills in front of the House to be able to pay for services for the children of American male veterans who served in Vietnam and for the Vietnamese children. It was introduced by Rashida Tlaib, and honestly, I don't know how many have signed on to it, but it's important to those of us who have been working on this issue for many years to continue to inform the politicians and the American public that wars continue after the hot wars stop and after the boots leave the ground, etc. So we keep that in mind. And also a reminder to what's going on in Gaza, and that in fact, we and the Israelis continue to leave the remnants and the poisons of these weapons of destruction behind. And we now are leaving them all over the world, certainly in Sudan and Iran. And a reminder that what we started so many years ago continues today. And to have that understanding, and I know I keep going back to it, of history. Maybe some of the political conditions have changed and some of our administrations have changed, but the major driver in this country is a corporate structure that produces the arms that keeps us fighting all over the world and identifies enemies, quote, enemies all over the world. And kind of a reminder that Ho Chi Minh said all those many years ago that the enemy is the American government and not the people. And I'll just say it is the people if we in fact don't act. So we have kind of a huge responsibility to keep working and to keep acting. So thank you for listening to me tonight. I feel as though I've been on the soapbox. I'm going to ask for a report from Peace and Planet News. Is Tarek still with us?
I've been with you the whole time.
Oh my goodness. Oh, good. It's good to see you. Okay. It's yours.
So, Peace and Planet News has a new edition coming out. It should be out tomorrow or the next day. It's going to the printer tonight. And if they do it tomorrow, I'll pick it up and I'll have it for mailing out. You can see a PDF and get an idea, there's some incredible pieces in it that apply to Iran, that apply to Gaza, that apply to pretty much everything that we are concerned with here. So that issue is coming out. It's the April-May issue. And if you go to peaceandplanetnews.org, it's right up at the top, the very top, so you can order it there. And the other thing is, we were requested by the Climate and Militarism Group to do a reprint, to reprint the climate and militarism issue. And we did that, but we updated it with some new articles that are quite relevant. So that is available also. And if you go to the website, peaceandplanetnews.org, you'll see a way to order both of them. So that can be ordered. We have a limited number of those. But anyway, and if you people want the papers in time for the 28th, to No King's Day on the 28th, to distribute them, to help to educate the people that come to those events, hand out the paper, I suggest ordering it by Friday the latest, so we can get it out to you, so you get it in time. Thank you all for your support. Thank you, Susan, for the great support that you've given for a long time for the paper.
Just to mention, when you go to demonstrations and you have something to hand out, it's an opportunity to educate people about what's going on in the world, about what Veterans for Peace is doing, and to get more support and to be able to keep building organizations and pathways to peace. I'm sorry, I think I did see, Trevor, did you have your hand up?
No, that was just the clapping emoji, but I do have 2 points I want to share when there's time for it.
Sure. I was going to say, Nick is not here for Ban Killer Drones. Pete, did you want to say something about Peace and Planet?
Yes, correct. The sweatshirt he's wearing, can they be ordered, or that's an old one?
This is an old one. It's a Free Palestine shirt. I don't know if you could see. It says underneath.
Okay.
It's from when we were in the West.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Nick is not here tonight, but just speaking of billboards, and Tarek, I don't know if you want to make this announcement, but we have a billboard up in Puerto Rico near the air base, and it's about drones, and I wish I were able to show it to you all, but it's really cool. It has a picture of the drones on it. And again, it says to active duty, you have the right and responsibility to refuse illegal orders. So we are all over the world, almost all over the world.
And we're getting 3 billboards up in Portland, Oregon, including a billboard about ice out of Portland, and everywhere. So those are going up also.
Thank you. And Bob has his hand raised.
Just a quick question. With the gas prices coming up and you got to pick up all these papers, is the price going to stay the same?
The price is going to stay the same. There are some people who order the papers and they make an extra donation, and that's always appreciated. We want to keep the price the same. We want the papers to get out there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
As long as we make enough to cover printing, I don't get paid. Ellen doesn't get paid. Mike Ferner doesn't get paid. None of our editors get paid.
Jeez.
We do it because it's a labor of love, and because we realize how essential the printed word is. The printed word. I'm emphasizing that because there's this whole technological, thing going on where people think that, oh, it's all online, everything is online. How about books? How about printed word? They impact the consciousness more. You can hold in your hand, it's organic. So we want to keep that alive. and we want to keep it alive with really good dynamite writing. And people who get the paper appreciate it. When I hand it out, I tell this is an anti-fascist newspaper, and you'd be surprised how many people pick up on that. It's an anti-fascist paper from Veterans for Peace, and it goes. So I don't know why I said that, but no, we're going to keep the price the same.
Thank you. Okay. Japan Peace Speaking Tour. Rachel.
Yes, thank you. We started to have our monthly meeting with our colleagues in Japan, and starting from this month, I added one new segment to the meeting, which is among those whom we encountered last year. We invite each month one of them as a speaker, and this month I invited a person whom we met in Okinawa. And he talked about his post-war experience and how people handled during the Vietnam War period and what's going on in current. As a long story short, I just wanted to mention one information that we collected from him. That is, as you might know, Okinawa's crime rate among servicemen are very high, and the reason why they commit so much crimes in Okinawa was because they want to avoid being deployed to frontline. They commit crime so that they will be court-martialed, then brought back to the United States. That's what they wanted to do. So this is a kind of a very surprising fact that why Okinawa has a high crime rate.
There's also a lot of bases there and a lot of military who are there.
Oh, of course, that 70% of a U.S. military base in Japan is concentrated in Okinawa. Yep. And also right after the you know that when Okinawa was reverted to Japan, it was 1972 during the height of Vietnam War. And also same year they reviewed the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, and the huge anti-U.S. base movement took place in mainland Japan. They wanted to get rid of the U.S. bases from mainland, and the U.S. military wanted to have more power concentration in Okinawa as a stepping stone for Vietnam. So many U.S. bases shifted from mainland to Okinawa. Then after that, Okinawa was returned to Japan, and ended up with so many U.S. bases. And after that, the U.S. dollar was commonly used before the return. Then Japanese yen was introduced, and everything got so expensive for local people, whereas their income remained the same, or many of them were already fired from U.S. military bases. So it was a very, very difficult time, economical time, and many people ended up with fishing. The wild nature was their cheap food supply. So it's really heart-wrenching stories that we heard from him. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what I have after this, of course, all of you will be interested in the national board meeting is this Saturday. If you're interested, it starts at 12:40 Eastern Time. We will be discussing the regular business of the board and then have our political meeting after the end of the board. Again, 12:40. Hopefully the meeting won't go beyond 2 hours. And then everybody welcome to join in discussion.
Working across teams is
recommendations about where somebody is
that's
not.
because Asana is where humans and AI coordinate.
I think Trevor wanted to say 2 points before and he missed the opportunity, no?
We're gonna go. We're not done yet. That was
I'm
just
sorry.
the
I'm
next
sorry,
issue
Susan.
on this agenda. Sure. Trevor.
Hey y'all. So yeah, I have 2 points. I help produce a weekly panel show with the Communist Party USA that streams to multiple platforms. And the reason I wanted to bring it up at this meeting is because we'll be having a special guest. Oh, it's every Friday, 10:30 a.m. This Friday, special guest is our very own Susan Schnall. And we'll be discussing fighting the war machine and kind of all the different aspects of that, the predatory nature of military recruiting, the poverty draft, um, the idea of a new draft and boots on the ground, Pete Hegseth's warrior ethos and religious war, and people impacted by U.S. imperialism abroad and at home, environmental and nuclear concerns, and what do we do about it? Building the peace movement, connecting generations, and also, talking about a model of military service that's not tied to imperialism, but rather, a transformative force to improve rather than destroy. So yeah, a lot we're going to be talking about. Again, that's Friday at 10:30. I'll post the link in the comment section right now in the details, but a quick note is the link just goes to the general CPSA YouTube page. Um, when we are on the day, it's going to be going live, so it'll appear there closer to 10:30. So there's that. And then my other point is on March 26th is going to be the hearing for Nicolas Maduro, and I would assume for Celia Flores as well. I don't think they've released the time yet or what courthouse. I'm assuming it's going to be in Brooklyn or Manhattan, but I'm going to try and get a group together from CPUSA to go, and I'd also love to see some Veterans for Peace members there as well. I'll, continue to try and find information, and I guess I'll forward that to Bob or some other VFP members to pass that along. So just wanted to also raise that because, it's very important that we're there to say, we're against the U.S. Infringing on other nations' sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Is there anything else? Anne Marie, I see that you're on. I don't know if you're still with us. Okay. And Jason. Okay, everybody. Anything else, Bob?
Yeah. Well, it's a week, it's 10 days away, but Charlotte Phillips asked if we had a meeting place for March 28th, Saturday, the No
Oh my
King's
goodness, in New York City from Brooklyn for Peace.
Right. She wanted to, hopefully hook up with us. So I guess I'll keep an eye on what other people are meeting and maybe the grannies, and I'll get back to her about that.
Terrific. Thank you. Unless we have a huge response from the group who's here. Okay, thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've got past events. You all can see it in the announcement that Bob sent out. Any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you all. Good to see everybody tonight.
Great to see y'all. Have a good night.
Good night,